All right, so perhaps you have skipped the previous video on what were the results of the questionnaire. In that questionnaire, we found that people are spending approximately 11 hours, so on average, 11 hours per week on the project. And this is the time spent outside the lab, which is 3 hours a week. Okay, so you're not adding in the sprint planning, stand-ups, review, retro. That's a separate amount of time. That's your lab time. And that's not including the time spent watching lectures, doing some reading, studying, taking a quiz, and stuff like that. We really want, so this is a problem because as we sum up 11 plus 3, that's 14. Then we add in 4.5 hours, which seems to be what people are reporting they're doing on the lecture, plus some studying and quiz. So that's 14, that's 18.5 hours a week. And our goal is somewhere around 12 to 13 hours a week on average. And that even that, you're going to say, well, that's a lot. Yeah, that's the university norm. This is one of your, I would say, busier courses. And so we're going to hit that university norm. We're not going to go on the light side, and we're certainly not going to try to be on the heavy side. So at first, I had some ideas. I mentioned I had an earlier one of these videos, and I had some ideas. Some of those ideas are still good. Okay, so for example, suggesting like people should work hard on their meetings. Okay, have an agenda, try to stay focused, don't have extra people at the meeting who don't need to be there. Try to make your meetings more efficient. But you know what? We haven't taught you a lot about how to make more efficient meetings. Your meetings are what they are, okay? It takes time and energy and experience to be able to cut down your meeting length. So that suggestion, while good, isn't going to necessarily result in people spending less time on their meetings, okay? Likewise, in the previous video, I have talked about, think about where you are with respect to the reported sort of center of things. And so while the average is 11 hours, really the center is about 9.5 hours of time spent on the project. So if you are spending lots more time than that, you should probably really be thinking about reining it in. If you're spending less time, maybe you should be considering, should you be doing more? But again, that's really hard for people to control that, I find. But people should have a self-awareness of that and be thinking about trying to move themselves towards the center. But I can say that, but I still don't think it will solve anything, okay? It's going to be really hard for the people who put in lots to rein themselves in, and it's hard for the people who don't want to do a lot to push themselves. So fine, we have our teams. We're going to do a peer evaluation at the end. You're going to tell me who was working so hard and who wasn't working so hard, and who was a great teammate and who wasn't a great teammate. That's all going to pan out. We're going to get our rewards and punishments there. I, of course, have all my other observations and everything in GitHub and in Codio and stuff, and I can see stuff that's going on, and that's going to influence things there. So let's not worry about trying to perfectly get everyone right near the right amount of time. What I can do, it finally occurred to me, what I can do as a manager is go, well, wait a second. I keep telling you not to put in so much time, but you won't listen to me. And I finally realized I actually have a solution to that. So I want you to spend about 5 to 6 hours on the project outside of lab. How can I do that? Well, so let's just look. If we do that, add this up, that'd be 13 hours a week. It's a lot, but at least it sounds reasonable to me. Okay, so wait a second. So 5.5 is half of 11. So, it finally occurred to me. All I need to do to tell you on sprint 4, we're not going to change sprint 3 because that messes things up unbelievably to try to change a sprint once it's underway. So continue with sprint 3 as is. But with sprint 4, you need to be very aware that what I'm going to tell you to do, the solution is, therefore, have your velocity on sprint 4. So if you've got a velocity right now of 20 story points per sprint, sprint 4, your velocity is 10. If it was 12, now it's 6. Okay? You're like, well, how are we going to get everything done? You aren't going to get everything done. This is one of the important things that I'm trying to have this course simulate, when it's been really hard. Which one of the things to simulate is, look, you have a limited amount of time, and you really have to work hard mentally to design a system that still gives value, but is simple enough to be done in the amount of time that you have. You got to figure out how to cut the scope. You've got to figure out how to make simple designs. And instead, what we have is we have people, I'm going to put in 30 hours. I'm going to do this, all this. This is going to be we're just going to pack this thing. We're going to get tons of features in there. And you're not dealing actually with the limitation on your resources. You're cooking yourselves. You're working really hard. You're wearing yourselves out. And then you're telling me that the course is making you do too much. But the course has 8 weeks of doing this project. And this project, the rate of your work on it is self-determined as a team. And I want the teams to be able to learn to estimate and produce a flow of work that's respectable with regard to, outside of lecture and lab, your homework's taking you, 5 to 6 hours. I think the syllabus said more, but let's ignore that. So look, this is like, again, the idea is it's about one homework a week. So we know that from the data you've supplied that you're putting in about this much time. So I want that much time. So we have to cut your velocity in half. It's as simple as that. And so yes, when you go into that Sprint 3 review, you're going to need to be thinking about the fact that you've already gone and you've estimated roughly what your product backlog is. You know what your velocities have been. You need to be having a conversation with your client at the Sprint 3 review saying, yes, we know that we can only do about this many story points in Sprint 4. And that's half of what you've been doing in the previous sprints because you've been working too hard. You've been exceeding, it's like you've been all staying late at work and working the weekends. And that's not the idea. Okay? So as your boss, as your manager, I'm telling you, go home, get some sleep, and put in a proper work day rather than pushing yourselves to the limit. And so, yeah, you're going to have that conversation with the client. And what you had thought you would be getting done, you had made these estimation worksheets at the last sprint planning. You're definitely more and more, you're going to need to cut stuff off, really make that client think about what is really critical to this project that needs to get done by the end of Sprint 4. By the way, you need to be thinking about what sort of documentation still needs to be written. If you haven't gotten it written, you better have a story about writing documentation. Okay. Factor in what sort of testing is going to be happening or is left to test. Factor in those bug bashes. Okay. Factor in what you think. So have some sort of story to capture some of that stuff. That's all going to take time. And it all needs to come and be part of the story points that you're estimating for Sprint 4. And you shouldn't calculate, if you were to calculate your normal capacity, that would be too much. I want you to take the velocity that you calculate that you're running at, cut that in half, and then compute your capacity. And that's what your goal is for Sprint 4 with regard to stories that are going to be done. You're going to have a high quality goal in Sprint 4. You're not going to forget to have documentation as a story, but you don't have much time. You're going to be busy with your other courses anyway. It's the end of the term. We all know what that's like. Cut it back, okay? Take it back, see what you can do, Practice the skill of cutting scope, negotiating and talking with a client about what is the most important thing to get done. That's the skill I want you to develop. I want you to deliver a quality product that works and is useful within the limited time that you have. And by the way, if you're at the point now where you're like, but we're going to be missing a must-have feature then, either come up with another design that solves it so that you don't need that must-have feature, or just admit that things didn't go as expected and planned. It's just the way it is. Sometimes this happens in software. All right. If we're going to be doing Scrum and Agile in this course, this is really what has to happen, is we have to figure out what the velocity truly is that gets us to the right amount of time. I'm probably in the future years going to ask people to keep time logs, and so we can calibrate and adjust everyone's velocity more appropriately. I've also thought about moving to maybe sort of a labor-based grading setup. It doesn't sound like that would ever work, so I'm probably not actually going to do that. You can look at Google, search for labor-based marking or labor-based grading if you're curious. What else? Other option is to go back to a waterfall approach to development. And so a team works and we have a deliverable that's the spec. And that's what they promise to deliver in the amount of remaining time in a course. And then they're held to that spec. And then invariably they realize they estimated things wrong, and then they have to negotiate to cut scope. And we could play the whole traditional waterfall game. You'd still find yourselves working harder than you expected, at least with this. So what I need to do is I have people keep time logs so that we can calibrate and get the velocities right for the teams, and we can maintain a healthy and good even flow of work throughout the sprints. All right, that's the solution.